Start your forward-facing rose by painting a small stretched out letter C in the center of where your rose will be. Because rose petals are tighter in the center, you'll want to use less pressure to get a thinner stroke toward the middle of your rose, and then you'll gradually make your brush strokes thicker by applying a little bit more pressure with your brush as you go around. You'll want to leave a little bit of white space in some areas just because that will give your rose the detail it needs to look like a rose. You'll notice that I'm not reloading my paint as I go around. That's because I want to create the illusion that the inside of my rose is tighter and hasn't opened as fully as the outer petals. Before the paint totally dries, load up your brush again and just dot a little bit of paint into the center of your rose to make it look darker. Start out this next rose exactly like the first one. So I'm going to be painting this rose so that it's facing more at an angle rather than totally forward facing. To do this, you'll want to keep the majority of your petals toward the bottom of your flower, a little bit at the sides, and then a tiny bit along the top. You'll notice that I'm keeping the petals along the top thinner by adding less pressure with my brush, and then the petals along the bottom thicker by applying more pressure with my brush. Remember to leave that white space to keep it looking like a rose. Same as with that first rose, once you've finished, go back and dab in a little bit of extra paint in the center of your rose to make it darker. If you're not sure where the center of your rose is, just dab paint in the first couple brush strokes you made to start the rose. The next rose is going to be facing upward, so we're just going to see a lot of the side of the rose. You'll add in petals mostly at the bottom. Just like with the first two roses, you'll apply less pressure with your brush in the center of the rose, and then your brush strokes will get thicker as you go. The next rose is going to be less open and full than the first three, and we're just going to see the side of the rose. You'll start this one out just like the last one that was facing upward, but instead of adding petals side to side, the petals will be running up and down. You want to keep the bottom of your rose rounded. And your rose will kind of look like the bottom half of an egg when you're done, with the bottom being a little bit more full. When you dot in extra paint on this one, only dot in toward the very top of your rose to create the illusion that we can only see a little bit of the center of this rose. This last rose is going to be a bud. To do this, you'll want to paint a few stretched out C lines. The first curve is going to be facing toward the middle of where your bud is going to be. The next is going in the opposite direction, connecting the middle of your first brush stroke to the bottom, and then one last stroke to really round out your bud. Go ahead and add more paint where you feel like it needs it, but other than that, these basic roses are finished.